Thank you for having me here again today.
Oh, thank you for joining me again.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like, I'm so happy that we connected and I'm so, I consider you like a part of like this new tribe that I'm developing of like intuitive leaders and like just
Ooh,
like
I like that.
spiritual coaches. Like seriously, I'm not even kidding because it's one thing when you can, and we've talked about how our stories and our background like align so much, but then, when you have that sort of empathic ability, which I know you do as well, it's like I connect. I get it. Like I'm totally connected to you. So I appreciate you coming back. And not only do we have a lot of the same like little intricacies of our background of how we landed in the coaching world,
Mhm.
but our interests, I think, is very aligned in like these little ways in which we have to learn to come into our own and move away of things that are holding us back. So thank you because I feel like we have a lot to talk about in that arena today.
Yeah,
So tell us a little bit about yourself, just for the viewers who didn't get to get a nice intro to you from your first episode. Tell me about yourself. What do you do? Where do you live? What's going on with you and what's lighting you up?
sure. Yeah. Okay, so my story is I grew up in St. Louis and I thought I would never come back to St. Louis, but here I am again. Somehow that tends to happen. We always end up
Mhm.
going back to our families and where we were born. But yeah, so I was born and raised in St. Louis. I went to the University of Missouri, became a nurse because my parents told me to become a nurse, and it was a well paying, respectable career. And then met my husband in nursing school, and he was in the army and uh, all over the world. We lived in Hawaii, we lived in Seattle. So that was great to get me out of Missouri. But I realized that I was creating this white picket fence life that on the outside looked really pretty and perfect, but on the inside, something felt wrong. Something felt like it was missing. And then in 2016, the universe decided to help me to accelerate into my new life by I got a divorce and I got fired from my nursing career all in the same week. Luckily, I was working with a life coach at the time, and she helped me to figure out what I wanted. So what I did is I sold all my stuff. I traveled all over the world for 2 years, a little bit with my boyfriend at the time, and then by myself to like refine myself, rediscover myself. That's when I decided that I wanted to become a life coach. I was so intrigued that my own life coach was doing with me. I saw how much it was like waking me up, transforming me. I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I'm meant to do in life. So started my online coaching business, went through a formal coach training program, and then it's just been taking off since 2016. So now I work with women all over the world, mostly doing business mentoring now. I find that I attract a lot of women who also feel called to become life coaches and start online coaching businesses. And I'm going to be creating my own online coaching certification next year. Just published my first book, Beyond the White Picket Fence. Just had my first son, Lincoln, a year ago at home in the pandemic. And yeah, that's my life pretty much is learning how to be a mom and being an online entrepreneur and still remembering the parts of me who I was before I became a mom, before I became a partner.
Mm.
Yeah, some days it all makes sense and it's beautiful, and other days it feels overwhelming and I just cry all the time. So
Yes.
that's
And
it.
thank you for normalizing that because
Yeah.
I think I mean, I'm even learning it myself. I'm in it too. Like we have to make space for the messy. And I think, yeah, we're going to have those days where we feel like all over the place and totally disconnected. And it's a sign that you probably need to take a break and rest, or you probably need a good cry. You probably need to actually let whatever's going on happen
Mhm.
instead of go, 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 which I
Yeah.
love how things all connect to like the topic at hand.
Yeah.
Because, and what comes up for me, and I've said this a couple times, in your book, which I have right here, Beyond the
Yay.
White Picket Fence. I'm always backwards, sorry. Which I love this cover, by the way.
Mm.
Ah.
There's a story behind
Of
that.
course, I could look at me, I can't even do this. Like, I could imagine, I'm like, the comfort of you sitting there, like, I think that's part of what I'm, like, kind of waking up to. Like, I look at that image and I'm almost there with you, like, "Woo, woo." But it's such a good example of what's inside this book because it is really getting out, in the mindset world, I guess we talk about, getting outside of your comfort zone or whatever, but it's really like more than that. It's stepping outside of the expectations that the world sets with for us, specifically as women. We're supposed to have the perfectly clean house. We're supposed to have the white picket fence. We're supposed to have the perfectly groomed, smile on the faces children. We're supposed to have all our aesthetic perfect. And it's like,
Mhm.
keeping up with that, I feel like is almost insidious at times, is almost, not almost, like it's flat out detrimental to some women's health.
Right.
And because we are not living in like a realistic, under realistic expectations, first of all, but we're also putting parts of ourselves on the back burner and taming some of our like own like dare I say it, like feminine energy and like, that ability to just sit and be you and just like be intuitive and be emotional and be sensitive and be always processing. Like we can't do any of that if all we're doing is trying to check off all these boxes that we're told that we need to check off.
Right.
Um yeah. The the topic that we are planning to discuss today is something called the mother wound.
Mhm.
So, when and if you're listening to this, if this is something that you've heard of before or that resonates with you, drop me a note in the comments. I want to know, like, it's just on my mind, like, like how many people have sat with this concept before and for how many people it's like totally new. It's relatively new for me, but probably one of the most, the one of the concepts that has been presented to me in this last couple of years that I've been in like this state of like constant learning and constant spiritual growth because people like Krista pop up in my awareness and many other people too who are talking about these things that I am now ready to actually absorb. So it's about when you're really really ready, I think, to talk about it. Um but yeah, so the mother wound being, I think it's, it can be defined a few different ways, but the mother wound being the connection, potentially a distortion of the connection between from mother to daughter based on the patriarchal society that we live in, inclusive of those expectations set up for women and how women are still, we've come a long way, but are still in a state of being less than, and
Mhm.
how that manifests in that in the passing down of that trauma really between from mother to daughter, and then how it manifests for the rest of the world because that daughter then becomes a mother, or becomes a nurturer of some kind because that's what we do as women, whether we have children or not. We're still teachers, we're still nurturers, we're still supporters and caregivers. So, how that manifests for the entire society as a whole, because we're still living with these feelings of needing to comply um, and to fit into these categories and to manage those feelings that come up when you still live in a society where you are meant to be tamed and meant to change yourself. So that is a probably a long-winded version of. I'm sure if a therapist or somebody would have like a very like perfect definition. But this is how it's been coming up for me. So tell me like what your experience, like how this concept was presented to you. I would love to know like when you felt ready to like talk about this and why, and then like what it actually means to you.
Yeah, I was trying to think of like when is the exact moment that this whole healing the mother wound came into my life, and it wasn't actually super long ago.
Yeah.
I think that it may have been earlier this year of 2021. So I'm definitely not the expert, but I have been like publicly talking about it in my Facebook group and with everyone I know. And it's been, many people have been like, oh my gosh, me too. That makes so much sense. So like in my Facebook group, Build Your Life Coaching Biz, I try to be really vulnerable with like my daily struggles of and challenges of being a mom and being an online life coach and business owner. And I think I started posting about my that the universe was asking me to work on healing my relationship with my mom. The universe always asked me to work on focusing on certain parts of my life.
Yeah.
And so at that time it said, okay, you need to, there's something with your mom here that's ready to be healed. And then one of the coaches in there was like, oh, have you heard of Bethany Webster? She's getting ready to publish this book called Healing the Motherwound. And I was like, perfect. So I ordered the book. I attended her online book party and started like really learning from her. And yeah, there is this whole thing called the mother wound. There is a reason why we struggle so much in the relationships with our moms. And it, for me, it just brought so much relief and like, oh, there's nothing wrong with me. And I am enough. And so it just came at the most perfect timing to
Yeah.
find that book. And the journey's not over. Like I really like dove headfirst into it. And then I put a pause on it. And I know that I'm going to come back to it when it's ready to work through more stuff. But I think that's how healing is you can't do it all at once. You can't just say like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be done with it for the rest of my life. It's like you have to peel back that first layer and then you have to pause and then you go deeper when it's time to go deeper.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like where I'm at with it right now. But I think for me, the biggest, and you had kind of already mentioned this in the definition, the biggest thing is like, yeah, what does it really mean to heal the mother wound? And it's basically like, you're right, there's all this trauma that's passed down from generation to generation on the mother side. And there's all these unhealed things going on. And if you don't take the time to wake up and become conscious of it, you're going to continue to pass it down to your children and they'll pass it down to their children. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, fuck, like, I don't want to like put my stuff onto my son Lincoln, even though I don't have a daughter, it very much applies with, you know,
Yeah.
sons too. And so I was like, wow, this is my duty and my responsibility to work through my stuff. And then my mom has her own so much trauma from growing up poor. And then her mom was raped at a very young age and was an alcoholic and depressed. And so, there's all that like stuff that I'm going to be taking on as well. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this is my duty and responsibility to not blame my mom for the rest of my life, but to realize what's going on and then to heal it. And so, yeah, so it doesn't get continued to pass down.
Completely.
So that's kind of like my definition, interpretation of healing the mother wound.
Yeah. And yeah, thank you for bringing in the piece of it being like kind of our responsibility, as if we need another responsibility. But I think that what's important to note is that these are the responsibilities that are more important for the bigger picture. And, that whole concept of like heal the mother, heal the world. And that is like very much like a trickle down effect. Like you start with you, like you said, like that was presented to you because you were in a phase and probably still are, right, of healing things about your own past and with that you're still holding on to. So this concept is just one way in which we heal ourselves so that we can break the cycle. And I think one of the most important things in talking about this, like with my own therapist, for example, I think I was like having a conversation, I was feeling that pressure. Like I was feeling it because I was learning about all of this, which is so true what you were saying about like kind of taking a break, because I think everything, like it was almost like too fast for me to be absorbing all of this. And it felt very overwhelming. So then I felt this like heavy responsibility to like just change everything I was doing and to like just change like the entire person that I am and like my entire style of parenting and like just so many things. And I remember being very emotional about it in a moment with my therapist, and she just stopped and looked at me and said, because I said, I have to break the cycle. I have to break the cycle. And she just stopped and looked at me and said, you already have. You already have.
Mhm.
Like, just even in becoming aware of this,
Mhm.
right? And what that kind of like felt like inside of me, and what it kind of translated to was like, we can't do this like that. First of all, like, we can't do this overnight, but we also might not even be able to undo a lot of this in like one generation. Like, it really has to be like this slow build. We can't take on all of that. So, you're talking about generations before us and all that trauma trickling down. How can we be responsible for undoing it all in just one blip, right? It's unrealistic. So we make the effort, right? And we don't take it all on ourselves, but we have to make the effort. And it's like, how do we do that? You have to heal yourself and you have to become aware. I think we have to start
Mhm.
there.
Mhm.
And for me, like, I love that you were saying, oh, like, you're very aware of like certain very specific traumas that happened in your family line.
Mhm.
I feel like I know nothing about my grandmother. Like, I feel like I know nothing about her life. And it's like been one of those things lately for me, is like, I really need to start asking some questions,
Yeah.
just for that sense of awareness. But how it, as far as what I do know, how it kind of sits with me now is certain ways that I am healing myself currently, very specifically on the idea of that feeling enough that you mentioned already,
Mhm.
and not feeling like my existence is dependent on my productivity and my offering to the world and my aesthetic, the way I look and my body, and how I'm able to maintain that um appearance and keeping up with the Joneses and all of that, that my worthiness just is. Like, it just is. I'm worthy, despite all of that, and really actually fully believing that. And a lot of what that comes from for me is um feeling judged as a as I was growing up for not fitting into those boxes, and then we conform, right? And then we start to conform and change, and fill in all the check boxes of those expectations. But I can so clearly see now why, in my relationship with my mother growing up, why that was happening, why those ways in which I was guided to be, why they were there. They were there because of her trauma. They were there because of what she had to live with, the pressures and expectations that were always put upon her, and that she did such a wonderful job of fitting into, right? So obviously that comes through for me, and it can manifest how it did for me, which is just simply, having a harder time feeling enough and living really truly authentically, right? Which I know you have that experience too, because it's like, here you were trying to build this, picture perfect life, and you weren't really living how you wanted to live. You weren't really following your true calling. You were following your intuition. Meanwhile, that is literally like one of our most amazing gifts as women, is our intuition.
Mhm.
So, it's really, it could be squashing like that, the one of our most amazing things that we would ideally be able to access. And obviously it could manifest in a way more serious ways for other women. It depends on, what their family line experienced and everything. But I think it's important to note too that it's really not like the mother wound. I think brings up, once we talk about what it actually is, it brings up this concept, or this like maybe trigger for people of like, we're blaming our mothers, right? Or whatever. But it's not about that at all. I don't think it should be about that. It's like, your mother, if this is something that you're ready to address, like, your mother doesn't even have to be a part of it, a part of that journey. This is you. This is within you. Just like anything else, right? Just like literally everything else that really has to
Yeah.
start there.
Actually, I'd love to speak to that because when it was like really going down with my mom a couple months ago and we were really fighting and I was like, we need to go to therapy. We need to, like, basically what I wanted to do in therapy was I just wanted to point my finger and blame her for everything that she did to like fuck me up.
Mhm.
That
Yeah.
and I wanted to be witnessed in that. I wanted someone to like say like, "Oh my gosh, Krista, I see how mean and awful your mother has been to you and all the horrible things she's said and done." And then I realized like that's actually not the whole point of this. And I decided not to do. She didn't even want to go to therapy with me, and so I was like, "This isn't going to work. Like, it has to be two willing parties to participate in this." So I
Right.
actually took the therapy thing off the table altogether for at least for my mom and I to do it. And I actually just started focusing on me. I started working with my therapist on what was coming up for me because I wanted to fix the relationship, and you can't fix the relationship. I had to work, and I'm not even going to say fix me. I don't need to fix me, but I had to like work through and heal the things for me that was coming up. So yeah, you're right. And Bethany talked about this in the book. This is not about blaming our moms and yelling at them and pointing fingers at them because that's not going to do anything. And even in our romantic relationships, like you can't do that. If you want to heal any relationship and make it better, you really do have to say like, well, what's coming up for me at this time, and work through your own triggers. So I think
Yeah.
that's important to speak about that.
Completely. And then that's the goal, right? Is to feel when you're triggered, sit with it, and figure out why and learn from it as opposed to reacting, which in many cases ends up being blame. I mean, that's the first thing I mean, it doesn't even have to that doesn't even have to do specifically with our relationship with our mothers. That's everyone, right? The first thing when something goes wrong or you're feeling like upset, angry, sad, or something, whatever it is, if you're triggered, the first thing we do, if we don't have that space of awareness and being able to actually process and sit with our emotions, the first thing we do is to blame, is to point a finger as to why, or tell a story around what that situation means, and then we wear that like a freaking badge of honor and walk around with it, and that's how we get stuck. That's the stuckness. We live
Right.
in that blame. I love probably one of my, favorite quotes, which I think was the Buddha. I'm not sure. I've seen it anonymous, and I'm like, I don't know if that was really the Buddha, but it's basically, like holding a grudge is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Yeah. Wow, that's
It's like you're literally walking around with this. They're not. They're
yeah.
fine probably, you
Yeah.
know? So I digress a little, but just taking it, bringing that awareness into this conversation that like, not only is this not to direct you to blame your parent, but it's completely unproductive in the first place in any real situation.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I like that. You know what's interesting too? This just came up as you were talking. So, with my book that I just published, Beyond the White Picket Fence, my editor and ghostwriter, Nikki, she wanted me to include a part of my book about my relationship with my mom in there. And we interviewed my mom, and I had a lot of stories about my mom, and I actually
mm,
took them all out at the last minute. And I realized and this was before I started learning about the mother wound, and I realized I had too much unprocessed stuff to like properly talk about what was going on with my mom in this book. So the universe is asking me to make a second book,
mm,
and it's going to be all about motherhood. I was like even like thinking of titles last night, like I don't know, I may call it like I'm a bad mother, or I don't know, like it's going to be something about like motherhood on your own terms. And in there is when I'm going to really start to talk my own journey with motherhood, and then what's coming up with my own mom and everything. So I feel ready now to start more publicly talking about that, as where I didn't before, because again I just didn't understand like why I was so angry and resentful with her all the time, and why we didn't have the relationship I craved. And
yeah.
that's another thing too, actually, is that a lot of people think that you're supposed to be best friends with your mom, and that couldn't be further from the truth. Like some people do have that experience. One of my private clients is like obsessed with her mom, and they call each other every day, and they go
Mhm.
shopping. And I'm like, I'm so happy you have that, because most people
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah.
But like, what I've learned is like to be grateful that obviously my mom brought me life into this world, and that I like to say, I don't know if you got to this part in my book. Now it's called Finding Your Spiritual Asshole. Did you read
Oh,
that part yet?
it's so funny you said that, because then no, I didn't get to that part yet, but I was browsing what I have left, and that's like right before we got on. That's what jumped out at me. I was like, "Ooh, I can't wait to get to that part."
Yeah. So my first life coach taught me this topic of like, we all have spiritual assholes, and it's like
Yeah.
someone who signed a soul contract with us before we came into this life to teach us our greatest lessons and to help us form our greatest boundaries. And
Yeah.
it doesn't feel good at all, but it helps us to grow and step into our most empowered self. And so I can say hands down, my two biggest spiritual assholes, my ex-husband and my mom.
Yeah.
And even though like those relationships have been so painful, I've learned so much from each of them. So it's like, right, if we can really like see the lessons and appreciate them for what they're worth, then we'll stop saying, well, why don't I have this like best friend relationship with my mom? And why don't we paint each other's toes and
Right.
the moves?
Yep. Well, that's part of what is portrayed to us as what it's supposed to be like. So then, like you said, you could, yeah, call your book, I'm a bad mom, or I'm a bad daughter, or whatever it is, if I don't have that, because all of this is like this pretty picture painted for what this relationship with our mothers is supposed to be. All the Hallmark cards and the movies, and you know, all of the marketing is there. But there's also, it's like a vicious circle, because I do think that in that potential, um, in all of that, those limiting beliefs that are passed down to you potentially through your mother or through either parent, I think within that is the lie that you don't question your mother ever.
Right.
And and how dare you, you know? So it's a vicious circle. And, I'm sitting here just, even thinking about, you know, the sad situations where children are dealing with even worse stuff than this, and you're
Yeah.
still in that mentality of don't you dare question, and especially when the trauma or abuse could be coming directly from your parent and you can't question them. It's part of like
Yeah.
the agreement and the compliance of like living is like you don't question your parents, and it's like, okay, like how far can we take that? um and again, questioning and becoming aware of things is different than blame. um we don't have to sit and blame, because like we said, it's not productive, but it's yeah, there's something to be said about that for sure. um and yeah, so you were talking about taking out parts of the book, and that you were, yeah, it was certain, I'm realizing that too. Like there are certain things that I'm going to be ready to process, and then I'm going to be ready to share and comfortable with, even in this conversation, even in this, live right now. This is something that can be watched by my mother at any given time. So there's even a nervousness inside of me of what to put out there, because not because I have all of these things, all this, dirty laundry. I mean, I probably do, but whatever. Um, but because I am not, this is all about what I'm working on within myself. And there is no part of me that wants to hurt my mother by having this discussion. Not even a little, like, I don't even want to talk about it. I don't even think I need to. I mean, maybe we'll see what happens, but you know what I mean? So just putting that out there too, just to be totally vulnerable. Like this is hard, because even to have this conversation, let alone actually feel like you're going to sit and have that vulnerable conversation directly with your mother or share about it. This is how hard it is to even have these conversations, to address it. And it's all connected back to the same exact thing, that we don't question, um, that we comply. I think I keep saying that word because there's a quote from the training that which I'll have to I'll have to tag Bethany Webster. Don't forget to remind me. I'll have to tag her in this when it's live because like we're talking about everything. But um, I loved this quote. Women will continue to feel stuck as long as we feel our safety is contingent on compliance with patriarchal standards and expectations. So, like, it sat with me like, ugh, like that's what I got. That's the feeling I got from that statement of, ugh, because that feeling of needing to comply, um, of not causing a stink, of not being too emotional, of not, um, yeah, of being the supporting role and always being, and even so, like, even when there is chaos, right? Like, even having to be the one to smooth it out when meanwhile a lot of that could be inside of you and you have to smooth everything out. So, and that's one thing we didn't really touch on yet is like maybe what the patriarchy means. I feel like that's a triggering word sometimes, right? Because, you have all this, I don't know, media or whatever, like all this former portrayal of that, of like F the patriarchy and all of this. And it's like, okay, like look it up. The definition is literally like, did I write it down? Father or eldest male is head of the family, a society where the father or eldest male is head of the family. Men hold the power and women are excluded. So we're kind of like moving backwards here because it's like, okay, that mother wound exists from this trauma that our mothers lived in and all these expectations and all of this taming that they experienced, right? Because of the patriarchy. So we're going deeper into it. Men holding the power, women excluded from the power. And that's where that feeling of compliance has to come from. Like we are the supporting role. And we've come a long way, but not nearly enough. And because this is the month of moms, like just, because I'm just focused on motherhood this month, how does that manifest when you are mothering, right? And we've been talking about not only I've been having all these conversations in my coaching, in my episodes of like women who are mothering, but feel so stuck and so lost because now you have all these responsibilities of motherhood and so less of the power within your household to ask for support, like not to make demands, but to ask for support, to set boundaries because that's not part of how we're supposed to be. So now we feel guilt when we do any of those things, whether that thing is to prioritize self-care for ourselves and give ourselves space. We feel guilt when we do that. Um, so yeah, I mean, that's what's been on my mind too. Like even in our relationship with our partners who are still in this patriarchal mentality as well. And how does that work itself out when you're just a mom trying to keep your head above water and we still live in this society where the male family member is the one who has no shame in living life however the hell they want to. They come and go as they please. They do their thing. But we feel like we have to hold ourselves back from that because we're still living in this old way in our minds because it's literally passed down. Sometimes it's like I think it's important to note because it's like, well, why do I still feel like that when things have changed so much now? Yeah, they've changed, but not a whole lot. Not inside of us. I don't know if that resonates for you at all.
Yeah. So can you repeat that question?
Yeah, sure. I'm like losing my breath over here. So, yeah, like how do you think it translates when you're literally in motherhood, and you're actually in separately from living in a patriarchal society? Like how do you feel like that actually has an effect on when we're trying to be a mom, but like also do the things that we want to do, step outside of those boxes of compliance, step outside of the white picket fence picture, and you're trying to live your life, but you have all those same patriarchal expectations outlined for what motherhood looks like too, and what a mother's supposed to be doing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So actually a good example of this coming up is I decided next month I'm going to go to Guatemala for a week. An opportunity came up to do like a retreat at Lake Atitlan with some other digital nomads. And when I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, like I want to do that because before I had my son and before I met my partner Kyle, like I said, I was traveling all over the world.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a map on my back. It's travel
Mm.
is such an important part of who I am and my spiritual growth and my soul journey and healing. And I saw this opportunity and I was like, oh, I'd love to do that, but I can't leave my son for a week. He's over a year now, but he's still young. And then I was like, oh, and then Kyle's going to have to watch him. And this, I don't know. I just was like, here's this. My, uh-oh. Okay.
Yeah,
We're back.
sorry, you froze for a second, but now you're good.
So what I was saying is like, here's this opportunity right in front of me to honor myself and take care of my soul. And I'm like telling myself that I don't deserve this experience and that I'm going to be a bad mom if I leave my baby for a week and I'm going to bring other people to help take care of him and, just all these different stories. So finally, just one night I was like, no, I tell myself that if I keep thinking about something over and over again in my head, it's the universe trying to get me to take action. And I kept thinking about this trip over and over and over again. So I was like, fine, I'm just going to book the damn trip. I'm going to do it. And when I did it again, I felt this like huge amount of guilt. Oh, I shouldn't be doing this. Like, this is bad. What are people going to think? Like, this is irresponsible. Even my parents were making some comments of like, you're going to go to Guatemala and leave Lincoln for a week and don't add to what I'm already feeling, please. But finally, like, no, I just published my first book. I just got through my first year of motherhood. I do a lot of amazing things. Like, I get to do this for myself, and it's okay. And it's going to teach my son how to take care of yourself, how to go out into the world and explore. It's going to teach my partner how to have boundaries, with
Mhm.
me. And so I'm finally okay with it, but I had to do a lot of inner work to get to that place where I could actually allow myself to book that just 1 week trip to
Yeah,
Guatemala.
it's
So
a week, exactly.
yeah, I'm not even like, going for a month or 3 months, which, I would totally do if I was single and not a mom right now, or even be, but I think that's just a perfect example right there of
Yep.
how easy it is to get lost into our roles of motherhood and not let us pursue the things that we really want and need and make us happy because we choose to experience this guilt and put all this pressure on ourselves of what we think society would want us to do. And yeah, so I'm really trying to teach women that it doesn't have to look that way, and it can be a whole different way of experiencing motherhood and have it be
Yeah.
a place of feeling actually good.
So
Yeah.
how did that yeah, first of all, I am working on it. I feel like, like you said, you had to have that inner work done first to like be okay to like book it and like feel good. That's literally like you're breaking the cycle by doing this.
Mhm. Yep.
By, taking action, stepping outside of these expectations, and changing the way that motherhood looks for you. Um, like you were saying, like motherhood on your own terms. It's such a good example of what we just like live in when we are stuck in that mother wound, when we are stuck in that patriarchal mentality of women being subservient and self-sacrificing. So as soon as you step out of that, you start to break that up. You have to take action to do it. Yeah.
And yeah, Bethany also talks about that in the book as well, is that a lot of times mothers sacrifice so much of their desire and their happiness and their self-care and everything. And then they put that resentment onto their children unknowingly. And they kind of send the message, well, I sacrifice, or if so you have to sacrifice too. And my mom totally did that to me growing up. She would tell me all the time, like, well, when you were young, I had to go to nursing school and work long hours so that way I could afford to take care of you and this and this and this. And, like, I know that she wasn't like trying to do harm by saying those things, but that was harmful for me to hear that, because what I heard was like I was a burden.
Yeah.
And because I came into her life, she didn't get to live her life the way she wanted to. And she had to work hard to sacrifice. And so I want to make sure that, I don't say those kind of things to Lincoln, because those statements are harmful. I don't
Yeah.
ever want him to feel like I didn't get to live and enjoy my life just because he came into my life.
Right. Our children didn't ask for that burden of, that burden of being the reason why their mother didn't get to do something. That came from that feeling of guilt, of, and of fear of stepping outside of the expectations and doing the thing that you want to do. That comes from somewhere totally different. That's not their fault. But then this is a perfect example of how it perpetuates and it moves down into your children's lives. Let's see how much I can respond as far as in my life without giving too much detail. But yeah, no, I am completely on the same page with you. I experience a lot of the same with my relationship with my mother. Like, yeah, and I think it even seeps into our relationship even now. Like, I remember definitely getting those comments, as a child, and feeling, but it's more than that too. It's like feeling the actual resentment, whether you say it to them or not, like feeling the actual resentment and having, being a mother who's now walking around with the bitterness and resentment of sacrificing themselves. That does not allow you to show up fully and authentically and open-heartedly for your children. So it's like they don't even see you. And that's, I think, how, like, the real you. That's, I think, one of a few ways of how it manifested in my life, in my relationship, of like, there's a wall up because of that anger and resentment that my mother would feel about the life she had to live being different than what she really wanted it to be. And again, like, our children are not, they're not here for that. Like, they didn't ask for that. And again, this is hard stuff to untangle, and we can only do so much. We can make the effort, and we're still going to fuck up. We're still going to say shit that we're not supposed to say, and that's another thing that my therapist told me a few times, where I'm like, I don't want to fuck up my kids, and she's like, you're going to fuck them up.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, so this is not a game of perfection. It doesn't make any sense. It's impossible. But we have to do the work that we can do. We have to do it. Oh my goodness, there was something else I was going to say and now it's gone. Oh, yes. Out of curiosity, because even in my coaching with other women right now about prioritizing their self-care, the thing, and I knew that this would, once I really got into the coaching space and was really working with clients, and I knew that this would be such a huge piece of it, is open communication and your relationship with your partner, and how that can make or break a situation of when you're ready to do some shit for yourself. So out of curiosity, your husband, like, his reaction to you booking this trip was he sounds like a pretty supportive partner, but just curious if you're willing to share that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and he's actually my partner. I don't know if I'll ever get married again.
Oh, right. Yes. Sorry.
But no, it's okay. Yeah, so I mean, when he first heard, he was a little bit like, is it safe? And because a lot of people think countries outside the United States that they're all fighting and war and poverty and all the things. And actually it's a very beautiful, wonderful world out there. And that's how I choose to look at it. So he was worried about that. I think that was his biggest concern, actually. As the time gets closer, he might get resentful or mad or frustrated that here I am going off for a week by myself, and he has to work and take care of Lincoln. But I don't know. I haven't felt any of that yet. So yeah, when I entered the relationship with him 2.5 years ago, I was like, listen, I'm a very independent person. I love to travel. I want to live. I've designed and set up my career and my life so I can have all this freedom and flexibility. So he kind of knew from the start that wasn't going to be one of the more traditional type of relationships, and that I was also going to, do things for myself as well. So yeah, he is for the most part very supportive
Good.
as a man can be. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and it's true because again, it's because of what, the picture that's been painted for everyone, which slowly is shifting, hopefully, where there's a little bit of more of an understanding. But the only way that we get there, and I think the women have to be the driving force of this. This is what I've been talking about lately, is like, we have to have these open conversations. Like you said, you had the conversation about who you are. Granted, I think it's useful to note that you guys have been together for 2.5 years. A lot of relationships, where that conversation, where this transition is harder, this sort of transformational, period of time when a woman is starting to realize what's lacking and that there needs to be a change. A lot of it happens when you've been with your partner for 10, 20 years and you were a different person when you got together with your partner. And that's because you weren't that you had a spiritual awakening, or you didn't, or you just got to a point of desperation where there has to be change, right? So that's the issue, is actually having that partner be able to withstand and sit in the discomfort of that, of a person changing. And that's the other thing too, is like, we wouldn't have such an issue, I don't think, with our loved ones changing if we as a society just had a little bit better of a relationship with that open, vulnerable conversation, that healthy, open-hearted conversation. This is what's going on with me. This is this is what I think needs to shift. I don't, whatever it is. We're not even comfortable with that in many cases, I don't feel. And it's the only way. Actually, one of the other mentors that I've been working with does a lot of work. She does body work, where she actually works on people's like fascial and connective tissue systems to help them release trauma in the body. But there's an energy work to it too. And when she talks about, like releasing trauma, she like as a mode to break these cycles, that exactly the things that we're talking about. Like she talks about it, that generational trauma from the same way we're talking about it. And that's what she promotes every single time, is like literally the way to heal this is obviously your own self-care, your own healing, your own spiritual self-care. But in addition to that, if anything that's going to be outside of you to do to heal this stuff is all just talking about it, like actually putting it out there. So many of us are scared to like have that awkward, like even, your situation, I think is a great example of like, you put yourself out there from the beginning. I'm an independent person. You were able, I feel like there are women that would be the last thing they're willing to do, is to put that out there at the beginning of a conversation, the middle, or the beginning of a relationship, the middle of it, doesn't matter, because we are taught that is, well, that's bold, bitch, like kind of that mentality.
Yeah, a lot of, and I used to think this for the longest time, is that we need a relationship to be happy and to be whole and to live the fullest in life. And we don't. The best relationship is with ourselves. And so you're right. A lot of times we don't speak up and ask for what we want or what we need because we're so scared of triggering the other person or losing the relationship. And then in return, we lose ourselves. We reject the relationship with ourselves. And I was going to speak to something you said earlier. You're right. When I had my spiritual awakening in my marriage, that was what was the demise of my marriage.
Right.
Because I was ready to completely change and transform and to step into a new person. And my husband didn't like that. He didn't accept that. And it just didn't work. And it's okay. I think everything is perfectly designed in the way it's meant to work out. I believe he is not meant to be with me forever on this lifetime. So you're right. When I went into this relationship with Kyle, I was much more awoke and
Yeah.
a conscious woman. So it did make it easier. And you're right. There's a lot of people that have been in relationships for 5, 10, 20, 30 years. And now all of a sudden they're having this spiritual awakening. Actually, this happens with a lot of my clients. A lot of times when you feel called to become a life coach, have a massive shift.
Mhm.
You're going to have this big awakening, and it's going to disrupt a lot of your relationships as well. And it's a good opportunity for the relationship to change, and you guys can grow together, or you're going to, yeah, have to grow apart and maybe go your separate ways. And you just kind of have to let things work out the way it's meant to work out and not hold on to something just because, like we said, till death do us part, or, oh, I made an agreement 20 years ago when I was this different type of person. All right, we have to honor the person that we are today, the person that we're becoming. And even I have to continue to do this with Kyle. Kyle and I got in a big fight last night. Like, we're selling our house right now. It's, our relationship is up leveling and growing. And with that comes some growth pains. And so there's still I'm still shifting, and I'm still waking up in different ways, and communicating that to him. And sometimes it rattles him,
Mm.
and we're only 2.5 years into this, but it's not perfect. It's hard. It's really hard. Life is hard. Relationships are hard. Being a mom is hard. It's all hard.
Yeah.
Um, but I think what doesn't make it so hard is knowing, like, it is like having the support, right? Having the support of a therapist or a coach or an energy worker, and having these outlets where, oh, Bethany talks about this in the book. We don't have enough spaces for women to talk about what's really going on in their journeys as women and as moms. We need these safe spaces where we can, like, be pissed off, we can be angry, we can be upset, we can have these emotional releases. So I think that's really important. Uh,
Yeah.
and that's what will help us as we navigate these hard times, is to have these people and these safe spaces in our life where we can share what we're going through, release what we're going through. And so, yeah, that's
Yeah. I mean, that's been instrumental for me too. Like so many things, right? So many forms of self-care, and so many like uh people, having a tribe like that, that you can actually, sort of vent um or just really allow yourself to let your emotions free with is important. And like, yeah, like you were saying, like, you don't have to do it alone. Like, there are supporters for you, in coaches, in therapists, in energy workers. Because even like, even if somebody's listening to this and this concept is like scratching the surface of like a little of a wound, right? And then our instinct is to sort of, we step back away from that, right? Like, well, that's like that's tender, right? But yeah, because it is a lot to tackle this stuff on your own. You're not meant to. We're not meant to heal in silence, and because that healing is so uncomfortable, we're not meant to be in discomfort in silence. What is this? Like, it's not, but unfortunately it's a story that we've been told, of all the emotions just being too much, and if it's that tender, then back away and move on. um but yeah, it's a lot, but you don't have to do it alone. So I think that's so important to say. Ugh. This has been such a I'm so glad the conversation, by the way, went in this direction, because it's so, and it doesn't shock me either, by the way, that it like came to this particular head of a concept that's been so, been elevated for me, of like, how does that actually look like in your relationship? Like, what does all of this look like in the relationship when you start to make these shifts? Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
But I want to thank you for joining me. This has been great again. I love chatting with you. And so tell us a little bit about what you've going on, and tell us where we can find your book. And I'll make sure to put all those notes in the description too.
Yeah, thank you again for having me on this show. And hopefully, we can have lots more empowered conversations around beautiful topics in the future.
Yeah.
And yeah, taking an hour of your time on Sunday morning to do this. I really appreciate this, Samantha. So I have my website, KristaKathleen.com, and it has all of my things on there. You can get my book on there, Beyond the White Picket Fence. You can work with one, either to do life coaching, to work on personal goals, or if you want to do business mentoring and you want me to teach you how to become a certified life coach. And then I have my YouTube channel where I'm teaching new life coaches how to start online coaching businesses. So lots of resources on my website. But and then you can always book a free discovery call with me as well. It's a free 30-minute call where we get to meet each other, and I get to hear what's going on in your life and what it is that you want to create or achieve, and what's truly standing in the way or stopping you from having everything that you want to have in life. Right? So,
Beautiful. And don't forget the book, Beyond the White Picket Fence. I'm just showing it off again for anybody who pops in a little bit later on. I'm loving it. I'm the slowest reader on the planet. That's the running joke, is that Sam used to be in publishing for 10 years and she's not very good at reading. But that's why I was on the sales side. So it's okay. No, but it's really wonderful, and congratulations. Just like, even like everything that you've accomplished in the last year, like I feel like, wow, like, and you deserve this trip, lady. Like, enjoy. Oh my goodness. Like, it's and how important is that to like celebrate yourself? Like, where did we lose that? Like being able to literally say, oh, I deserve this. Like, I'm celebrating legit on my own, celebrating my achievements. I think it's so important. So this is why you're doing big things, because you're actually, absorbing it all and living it. It's beautiful. And I will let you go, but thank you for joining me on a Sunday morning. And I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Okay, sounds
Thank
good.
you again.